Welcome back to Next Gen Console Watch, our show following everything happening with the latest gaming hardware. I'm Daemon, and as always, I'm joined by my co-hosts, Ryan McCaffrey and Max Scoville. Welcome, gentlemen.
Hey. Hello, hello.
And today we're talking about Nintendo and the Switch 2, or whatever ends up being called. The latest reports claiming it has been internally delayed by Nintendo into March of 2025. Originally, we had expected it to come in the second half of this year. And this is coming from Japanese publication Nikkei, who said that the reason for this delay, I think is a little bit interesting, is to ensure Nintendo can manufacture enough stock to satisfy demand and therefore combat scalpers. And of course, we can remember how difficult it was to get a PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X for years after launch, and how scalpers were selling them for over $1,000. So this is an interesting idea if it's true. Max, let's start with you. What do you make of this sort of plan to combat scalpers?
I don't know how well that's going to work against scalpers. I think that's something that, we've seen with every sort of new piece of hardware. It's increasingly an issue. I feel like, Valve went out of their way to have like a weird way to have people get the Steam Deck. It was like reserve codes, one for customer kind of thing. There's still people scalping it. As for Nintendo, I think aside from just the sort of, scalping and supply issue side of things, I feel like launching the same time of year as the first Switch is really, really smart because it gives it a chance to kind of build some momentum. It gets it a chance to build up a bit of a library. It, obviously having a big sort of, tickle me Elmo grade holiday release, like the must-have, item of the fall or the holidays, that's a nice thing to have. But giving it a chance for this this thing to work its way out in the wild, gives people a chance to sort of evangelize it. Like it gets some of the early, launch bugs out of the way. I think it's just with the first Switch, something that's really funny is I remember like prior to it releasing, a lot of us were like, it was kind of skeptical. Like we weren't sure they were going to pull it off. Like we weren't sure what to make of it. Or like, even if they did pull it off, was it going to be successful? Because this was coming on the heels of the Wii U, which was, not Nintendo's finest hour. And I think the fact that it dropped in like a, typically not super busy time of year made it, the center of all the conversation. And by the time, November, December rolled around, it was well established that, you want a Nintendo Switch. You want to go out and buy a Nintendo Switch. So I don't think there's any harm in trying for that again, though obviously, they have the goodwill of the, the last 7 years of Switch to kind of fall back on. I don't think anyone's doubting it this time around. There's no reason to have any skepticism about Switch 2. Then again, Nintendo could always surprise us.
You're right. Obviously the original Switch debuted in March 2017. It's just the situation is so different now because, as you said, they were coming off the heels of possibly Nintendo's second greatest failure after the Virtual Boy, probably with the Wii U. And there weren't like the masses out there, the mainstream players weren't exactly looking for a new Nintendo console than like we hardcore gamers were. But of course, the Switch has now been even more phenomenally successful than the Wii. It has, very, very broad mainstream appeal. So it's just a different situation that Nintendo will find itself in launching in March. And it is still very unusual for a major game console to be released in March. Every Xbox has been released in November. Every PlayStation has been released between September and November, and every other Nintendo console besides the Switch has been released between September and November. So, Ryan, I want to hear from you. What's sort of your take on both the March release window and the strategy to combat scalpers?
I think Max makes a ton of great points. If it means that everybody that wants one, like all the us hardcore gamers, can get one on day one, that's a win. I mean, well, I will happily take that. I was able to get a Switch on launch day last time. I don't remember if it was particularly annoying to do or if I just got lucky or what, but it doesn't guarantee that then subsequent reshipments would stave off scalpers or even be able to kind of keep up with demand. But hopefully at least it means that everybody that's trying to get one on launch day has a reasonable shot to do so. But for me, the sort of downstream bonus effect to this, if in fact this is the real reason that that this is not going to come out till March versus this fall, is that it's stocking hardware, well, guess what? If the next mainline 3D Mario game is the big launch title, which I am hoping, and if I may say, even kind of expecting at this point, given how long it's been since Odyssey, or if it could possibly be Metroid Prime 4, if they might shock us with that one. If it's one or maybe both of those, probably not both of those, but if it's one or both of those, it means 3 extra months of polish time for the dev teams on those games, where not only will the games be more polished than they would have shipping in the fall, but hopefully it means less crunch. I mean, I don't know Nintendo's culture, if they sort of are guilty of crunch, if they tend to do that. Hopefully not, but it still means one way or another, it's definitely, it's healthier for the dev teams. They won't have quite as difficult of a fall, and then we get a better game out of it. So I will happily take that, even if it means waiting a few extra months.
Yeah, I know you have mentioned several times how eager you are to finally get the next 3D Mario game, and I share your sentiments exactly. Metroid Prime 4, our audience would love to get it. Just, we just know that Metroid doesn't have the same broad appeal that Mario does. Max, what would you think that possibly be a Switch 2 launch games? I think those two are candidates, but there's also this new Pokemon game that was just announced, Pokemon Legends Z to A. They announced it for Switch consoles in 2025, which is a strange way to word that.
Very weird. I mean, we're joking that like maybe they just mean they're not putting out one copy for one singular Switch. They're releasing it for all of the millions of them out there, so everyone can play. But no, like that is seems like odd. That's odd verbiage. Like that's not how they've been saying it. So I mean, maybe it would make sense for it to be cross-platform. I was thinking about this, and to my knowledge, I don't think there's ever been a Pokemon game as a launch title, or even particularly close to the launch of. I mean, I could be wrong about that, but like as far as like a day one thing. We usually will get like a Mario or, a Zelda here and there. Like there's always, Nintendo has a lot of flagship stuff, and there's always this sort of, Pokemon is one of the most iconic brands ever in history. And it's definitely something that could, move units if it was the right product to get people excited about it. But it's also, the Pokemon company has that, and Game Freak, there's that weird sort of like, exclusive partnership that's still not, like they're still not like an in-house thing exactly. Yeah, I mean, I would love a new Mario. I could also see them, double dipping on some of their, proven stuff, doing Super Smash Brothers Ultimate Final Edition or whatever, or the complete Mario Kart Deluxe 8 edition.
Like, yeah, with all the extra subscription tracks and all that.
Yeah, I mean, throw like a another layer of polish on there. Like I honestly think like some of these games that people adore. I mean, Tears of the Kingdom with I don't know what specs this thing is going to have. It's not going to be worse than Switch, and the fact that the Switch has as many good looking games as it does, is impressive. But there's a lot of room for improvement there, and that's never been Nintendo's strong suit. They've never been about like, oh, look at the graphics, look at the it's never been like about kind of more. It's always kind of quality over quantity. But I could see them, if they want to kind of pad the launch lineup a little bit, doing a few victory laps on some of the Switch's more successful things.
I think that makes a lot of sense. I think also Animal Crossing is a good candidate. That was a big hit for Nintendo in 2020.
Yeah.
So
I should add for a little historical context, Daemon, too.
Right.
I was looking this up just to make sure my memory was reasonably accurate. So if this timeline holds and it's March 2025 for the launch, the Switch was announced in October of the year before, of 2016. So there's no guarantee that Nintendo would follow the same playbook, but I think we can reasonably expect then an announcement in October of this year or earlier. I doubt they would announce it later than that, like closer to the launch, and have it really, really be a short window. So that's something to pencil in on the calendar is maybe October, but if it's not October, it'll probably be sooner than that rather than later than that for the announcement.
So March 2025 would be 8 years after the launch of the Switch. That might sound like a long time, but it's only 1 year longer than the time between PS4, PS5, and Xbox One Series X.
The 360 generation lasted that long as well, from
8 years?
360 to since the 360 came out a year before the PS3.
Exactly, 2005. So if there's no Switch 2 coming this year, that leads me to wonder what else does Nintendo have, because they have got Princess Peach Showtime next month. Later in the year, they have Luigi's Mansion 2 HD and Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door, both remakes. Is there anything like left in the chamber? Any big new release that Nintendo has left for the Switch before they move on to Switch 2? Either of you?
I wonder if there's been a Wind Waker remake talked about for an eternity. I wonder if that's real, and if it is, maybe Nintendo says, all right, let's drop that.
That would definitely be an easy sell. Do we know Metroid Prime 4 is next year, or
We don't know
have
for
they
sure
said
now.
anything?
We don't know anything about Metroid Prime 4,
Yeah.
sadly.
I mean, maybe they'll release an HD remaster of that graphic they showed us 6 years ago or whatever. Like it's kind of hilarious at this point that we've seen so little,
Yeah.
and it's still been talked about that much. At this point, I don't think Metroid Prime 4 could really land as a launch title, but I feel like with how many Switches are out there in the wild, that could be like a big flagship, holiday title.
Good. That'd be a wonderful send-off for the Switch. Well, we'll continue following all the reports that pop up throughout the year, and as soon as Nintendo's ready to officially unveil the successor to the Switch, definitely be talking a lot about it right here on this very show. We've got the results of the poll from last episode where we asked, would you buy a PlayStation 5 Pro just for Grand Theft Auto 6? Ryan seemed to think there was a compelling argument for that. However, 70% of our respondents said no, they're not going to buy a PS5 Pro simply for GTA 6. Do you believe them, Ryan? Do you think the hype will get to them?
Because it's not a cheap thing to do. I just that's the one game I'd be willing to dig deep into my savings account to do that for. So yeah, I totally get anybody that votes no. But 30% of us are still voting yes on that, saying yeah, we're ready to do it.
That's true. A not insignificant amount of people. New poll for you to vote on for next episode. Which would you rather have as a launch game for the Switch 2? If you had to choose, Metroid Prime 4 or the next 3D Mario Odyssey 2. Make sure to vote at IGN.com the day this episode goes live. We'll share the results with you next episode. That's going to do it for this edition of Next Gen Console Watch. Thank you to both Ryan and Max. Thank you to Jober and Ryan and everyone else working behind the scenes here in our LA studio to make this episode possible. My name is Daemon. We'll be back next week with more on all the latest gaming hardware. We'll see you then.